Welcome back to another episode of the Celtics Chronicle podcast. I'm your boy Adam Taylor, and today I'm joined by Yossi Gozlan of the Third Apron Substack newsletter podcast. He's doing it all, one of the best cap guys out there, and he's going to jump on with us and just talk about the Celtics offseason, how the Celtics roster shaping up financially, and then potential moves that they could make to kind of round out the roster. Yossi, thank you for joining us. I know it's early where you're at.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, for sure. Like, it's a pleasure of mine. So I kind of want to start there and just kind of get the findings that you had, just without me kind of asking any questions, just where you are with what Boston's off-season projections could look like.
So with the Celtics last year, we saw them completely dismantle their roster, reset their payroll. They traded Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis without really replacing them. And they were going to have, like, with all the tax penalties, a like $500 billion roster, which they were never going to bring back, even if they repeated as champions. So they went ahead and did all these trades. They got under the second apron. They got under the first apron. By the trade deadline, they were still above the luxury tax line, and the organization felt, we're already this close. Let's just get under the tax. Why not? It's not necessarily just to save the owner more money at that point. Obviously, with Tatum being injured with the Achilles, he ended up coming back, but there was a lot of uncertainty of, whether he'd play that year and then obviously what he'd look like the following year. So now on that end, he's looking good, thankfully. But the reason their luxury tax penalty was going to be so expensive was because they were in the tax for 3 years in a row. The rule is if you're in the tax 3 or 4 years, then you're a repeater taxpayer, meaning now you pay higher rates. You pay like an additional $2 per each of the tax rates. And then also the current CBA, they modified the luxury tax system, and it's now this year they're making it much higher anyways, the deeper you are. So the Celtics decided, let's get out of the tax this year, and then most likely they'll stay under the tax the following season, this 2026-27 season, because by being under the tax both those years, then they won't count as repeater taxpayers anymore, because then you're no longer in the tax 3 of the last 4. You're having been in the tax 2 of the last 4. And that would be the case for the following 3 seasons, for 2027-28 through 2029-2030. So most likely they'll stay under the tax again one more year. And that would set them up for a 3-year runway where they'll be able to spend into the tax. They could go pretty deep. Maybe they'll go over the second apron. Who knows? But the point is they'll be able to spend quite a bit because they'll have the normal tax rates. So that's probably the goal. And at this point, I would be very surprised if they do deviate from that. Maybe there is some type of opportunity out there that they could significantly upgrade the roster that would have them pay tax now. But I don't think that's going to happen. So expect them to have the same level of payroll. I guess the question is, can they make meaningful upgrades within the margins, knowing they're probably not going to spend all that much again?
One of the biggest conversations I'm seeing at the moment, and I wrote about it today actually, is using the MLE to try and find a way to upgrade. And I've got a very base understanding. It's very rudimentary compared to like yourself, Keith Smith, everyone who's kind of covering the cap on such a deep level. But from the base understanding I have, if you use the non-tax MLE, you're going to be hard capped at the first April. And does that in a way kind of help the Celtics, where they're not going to be able to go any deeper, which in turn helps them kind of achieve their goal of coming out of being a repeater team?
Yeah. So last year, the Celtics, all they did was subtract. They didn't really add anybody until the trade deadline. But even then, you were kind of subtracting because you brought in Vucevic, who seemed like a good fit, but you had to trade Anthony Simons in the process. Now they are coming into the offseason with the ability to add, because they are under the luxury tax right now. How much exactly they are, it's still kind of unclear. Depends what they do with some of their guys with team options. But they could, if they do nothing else, just use the entire mid-level exception, that $15 million amount. They can give someone up to a 4-year deal. Who are some of the players available at that range? I guess particularly big men, because that is something that they're arguably their biggest need. Maybe you could feel like a guy like John Collins. I'm just looking at my list of guys. I think Mark Williams probably gets a little more than that. You could bring back Robert Williams potentially. I'm sure DeAndre Ayton would fit in there. Yusuf Nurkic would fit in there. Maybe bring back Kristaps Porzingis. So overall, this is a pretty weak free agency class all around. I wouldn't like you're no matter what. I think you're most likely getting like a guy who maybe could start, but really most likely isn't that much better than Keita, so he could very well be a reserve. I'm actually keeping an eye out what they do on the trade market. I feel like that is where they're going to have to be a little more aggressive to find maybe one or two starting level players that they view can be a part of that next 3-year window that I was describing coming up.
And I want to definitely talk on trades in a moment. Just so, for my own understanding, for everybody listening, with the MLE, it's 15 million. So the Celtics can come in and be like, "Hey, I've just done a series where I'm starting a series today where I've looked at guards that are available with the MLE. Looked at Kobe White, looked at Kobe White, looked at Colin Sexton, guys in that area where it could be like, hey, here's the MLE to bring you in." And I do have some kind of experience of scrolling through Twitter and seeing people being like, well, it's 15 million that you have to spread over 4 years, or is it 15 million per year that you can offer? And I always get confused there myself. So I thought it's best while we're here to just kind of ask, how does that work in kind of structuring such a deal? Like with the MLE being, if the Celtics use a full 15 million, they can go 4 for 60 and do 15 million a year. That's my understanding.
So the 15 million, that's the first year salary. So as far as what they need to budget for this year, they can give a player up to $15 million, and then they could give them a 1-year deal, or they could give them up to 4 years. It's a maximum of 4 years, a little just under 65 million. And using it would hard cap them to the first apron, which is fine because they're most likely not even going to reach it, because if they stay under the tax is less than the first apron. They could trade for someone who's making within that 15 million amount and has 4 years or less. But they also already have a lot of trade exceptions, including that big Anthony Simons one, that $27.7 million amount. And it's also worth noting the current CBA. It's a little more complicated, where all these trade exceptions that they created mostly at the trade deadline, using those would also hard cap them to the first apron. They made it so using an older trade exception would do that. But either way, the Celtics are in a good spot where they could use those as well in case they want to spend a little more than the mid-level in a trade and they can't get there. Because if assuming you keep Tatum, Brown, and White, and I guess you want to keep Pritchard because he's on a great contract, all you really have is Sam Hauser's 11 million. You've got a bunch of guys on rookie contracts, minimum salaries. There's restrictions to how many minimum salaries you can combine and trade together. So other than that, you can also sign and trade Vucevic. Maybe he gets you far in as far salary matching goes. I think those trade exceptions, especially that Simons one, can actually be pretty valuable this year.
And that's kind of where a lot of Celtics fans are falling over right now. It's the answers are either trade Jaylen Brown, trade Derek White, or hope that a package built around a Sam Hauser plus young guy plus Anthony Simons TPE can kind of go and get you somebody that's going to be a difference maker. And the hard part I have for myself is talking to myself into believing that a guy that's available is going to be available for Sam Hauser plus young guy plus creating a TP on your own side. That to me doesn't seem like it's enough value going out to bring anybody of difference making level value coming back in, which is kind of where I'm like, maybe it's Derek White, maybe it's Jaylen Brown, but a package just built around Hauser, I don't expect it to be such a huge draw for other teams. Do you see a package like that being able to move the needle on the market?
For just Hauser, probably not, but this is where their draft picks come in. I think they're going to have to get creative in that department where they can trade 4 first-round picks. They have the 27th pick in the upcoming draft, so I don't know how far, how valuable those will be. That one will be. They have their pick next year, which I would think also might not be all that valuable because that should also be in the mid to late 20s. So then they could trade their 2031, their 2033. Those might be what interest teams to do to give them someone nice. So I think the Celtics, even though that they are in this kind of a holding pattern with their payroll, eventually the goal is to spend more money. But the issue is that if they wait until the following offseason to start making their moves, they're actually not going to be able to spend all that much money because all these different things we're talking about, using the mid-level exception, that hard caps you to the first apron. Using an older trade exception. So let's say they do what they did with they had that Porzingis trade exception, and then when they did the Vucevic trade, they structured it so they end up creating a bigger one for Simons. Even if they do something like that again, using that older trade exception, because it'll then technically be an older trade exception, using that next offseason, that's another first apron hard cap. When you do a trade when you're bringing in more salaries than you're sending out, that's a first apron hard cap. When you sign trade for a free agent, so all these ways that you could actually increase the payroll, the Celtics would kind of be restricted. They wouldn't be able to actually go that deep into the tax next year if they wait to do these moves next year. So what I'm keeping an eye on is I think they're going to have to try to make these moves now. And I think I recall Brad Stevens kind of alluding to, he said like we need to get better. He didn't say anything. Oh, I don't think he said anything that we're trying to have been a holding pattern. I think when you look at how they did the Derek White trade, for example, they traded one first round pick for a guy who was pretty undervalued on a very nice contract, and then he exploded, became this guy was making $30 million a year. Those are the types of trades I think they're going to have to try. They're going to try to look for. Can you bring a big man that way, who's maybe on a very cheap contract, like Ivica Zubac would have made a lot of sense. He was making $20 million a year. Or maybe you bring in like a rookie scale guy, whether that's a wing or another defensive guard, because they really value those. Can you bring those guys in while they're not making that much, and then you pay them later because there's no restriction on paying your own guys, resigning them, extending them. You can give them really as much money as you want, and that's how you can go above the tax, above the first apron, even the second apron pretty easily. So that's the big challenge. And I think, so you might be thinking, oh, they're probably just going to mostly run it back. I think they're probably going to be very motivated, if not during this offseason, at the trade deadline, to make some moves, to make their moves now to get them ready for the following season. And maybe in that regard, probably this season as well. If you're bringing them in now, then maybe you'd have a much stronger chance to contend for a championship.
See, I'd be all in for making moves now, assuming they fill the positions of need, obviously. There's two other areas that are kind of low-hanging fruit that I'd like to touch on here as well. Just because you have the need to bring in guys via trade, you have the ability to bring in somebody via free agency, but you also have two large contract decisions kind of waiting in the wings for Brad Stevens to need to deal with, and that's Jaylen Brown's extension eligibility, 2 years, 141.9 million, and then you have Peyton Pritchard's contract extension eligibility. And my stance so far has been with Jaylen Brown, he's not going to be getting that money for another 2 or 3 years. He'll be into his 30s. Do you want to be paying a guy who's predominantly explosive, predominantly athleticism based, $70 million a year when he's bordering into his mid-30s? And Pritchard, do you want to be paying a small guard anywhere up to $25 million a year when his ability to change direction and change pace starts to diminish as well? From the Celtic standpoint, what do you see the value is both for and against extending them? Other than it's just, oh, well, you keep your best players, you keep your core intact. Is there a world where signing guys to an extension now, so far ahead of when the extension is going to kick in, does that make a player more tradable, less tradable, or is it kind of even money?
So my philosophy is you probably shouldn't ever extend players. So there's multiple years left on their contracts. And with Jaylen Brown, I don't think he's an exception. You saw with the Blazers, Damian Lillard, they gave him that 2-year max extension in 2022 that only would have kicked in this past season. And so much time has passed. There's some decline. Unfortunately, had that big injury that he didn't end up even playing a game on that. Devin Booker just signed a similar extension last offseason that's still 2 years away from kicking in. I think there's a lot of downside there. I don't think he's going to be like that's before even considering if he's worth the 35% max now. I feel like that's really reserved for a very select few perennial All NBA level players like the Shea Gilgeous-Alexanders, the Wembys, and then you've got Jaylen Brown's like in a similar boat, mate. Whether or not you think he's better than them or not, like I think we're really like I just think there's a lot of risk when you're committing that early. So it's not really about the dollar amount. There's a good chance that maybe he'll still be worth something like that if he continues to play. But I think we have a whole lot of basketball to play. We need to see how these next 2 years go. At least I think before you consider extending him on anything. That's just what I feel that you need. It's just too risky to expend anyone for any amount that far out. Peyton Pritchard, he's got 2 years left on his contract. I think his situation's a little different where he makes so little relative to his skill that there actually might be some value in extending him now. He can sign like I think it's like 3 years, 67 million, something like that. Now I wonder if teams are going to start being a little more hardline when they start extending players versus taking them to free agency, where players they don't want to get into free agency. Will teams be requiring now maybe players take a little off their max extensions in order to give them the security now? So if the Celtics view Pritchard as a major part of their plans going forward, I would figure that his next contract is going to probably be at least the mid-level. I would imagine that based on how he's playing, he's probably going to get that. You can argue he's maybe worth a little bit more. Maybe is there something to be done where maybe he accepts like something below his max extension, but above the mid-level, what other teams can offer? Then I think that might be worth considering extending him now. Otherwise, just wait another year, see what happens. Let's see if he keeps this up going into next year. But that's the situation more or less on both their extensions.
I'm all in on not extending Jaylen Brown. I'm also all in on just exploring every option available in the trade market. And if that means that Jaylen Brown's name gets floated, then so be it. Same for Pritchard. I'm a huge Pritchard guy. I think there's about 5 of them. I might be one off, up or below. And when you're looking at these guys, how many do you expect to be bought back? Is it possible that for somebody like Amari Williams or Max Shulga that were on a 2-way deal, got converted onto a full-scale deal, and now have a team option heading into the summer, can Boston decide to decline that team option and then re-sign them to another 2-way deal? Is that a potential possibility?
So they have 6 guys with team options, and all of them, if picked up, their contracts still remain non-guaranteed. The only exceptions are Kada, he's going to get picked up most likely. But I think anyways, with the luxury tax goals, they just most likely pick him up and guarantee him. Jordan Walsh is non-guaranteed as well, but I believe he's got like a mid-July guaranteed date. So I would guess they pick it up, and then most likely he gets guaranteed. After that, you got Banton, he and Harper. If they are picked up, they don't have to get waived until they're not fully guaranteed until January. So they might as well just pick them up and figure them out later. Maybe they could use their salaries in trades, but maybe they could also decline them, re-sign them to a 1-year deal, so it'd be a little less on their cap sheet. And then you got Shulga and Amari Williams, who I suspect they'll just decline and re-sign the 2-way contracts. The main reason they put him on the standard roster was because since they drafted them, they count as less on their cap sheet last season than any other minimum signing would have. And that helped them barely stay under the luxury tax line last year. So I think they'll decline them, bring them back on 2 ways, and then they'd have the option again later to convert them again like they did this season. They would still have restricted free agency eligibility for another 2 years. So I think just for the sake of keeping optionality open, that's the path they go to. And maybe they even do the same thing for they have the 40th pick in the draft. Maybe they 2-way that guy as well in case they need to do another tax dance like they did last year where they saved money ahead of the trade deadline, and that guy's salary would also help them. It's the same thing where he counts less because they drafted him.
So here's the question I have for you. So you need to waive a few guys or decline a few team options, I should say. because you're going to be making a move in free agency. We're assuming you make the 27th pick as currently stated, unless there's a trade before or a trade on draft night. So a few guys are going to have to go anyway. At what point do you start seeing any of these guys becoming viable throw-ins just to kind of make up salary marginally? The problem with the TPE, as I understand it, is you cannot aggregate salaries plus the TPE to reach the level of a player's contract coming in, right? So if a player's on, if the Celtics have 20 million, 29 million in a TPE, whoever they're trading for needs to be 29 million coming back this way. Now, that doesn't mean Boston can't start throwing together a few guys to send them out because you just use less of the TPE that's coming in. Is that correct? Or is that aggregating them?
So as an example, let's say they want to trade Hauser. He makes $11 million, and then maybe attach one of their minimum salary guys. Let's just say it's Banton, because it's 2.8. That's kind of high. That is roughly like $13 million, I think. 14 maybe. So you can add an additional, you can take up to $9 million more of that. So that's the trade exception in terms of what you can take back for your players. But yeah, you cannot combine them with the trade exception. So whatever they take for Simons, he has to fit within that $27.7 million amount. But you could kind of do both at the same time where, let's say they want to acquire a guy who's making close to that full trade exception amount. That would put them over the tax. But to mitigate that, they could send out Hauser in the trade as well, just to make up the difference so they're in position to stay under the tax at the same time.
Okay,
That's allowed. Yeah, that's allowed, but they're not really combining the contracts and the salary to get someone who's making a certain amount. Two separate things are going on there.
So just to put it this way, you're not flipping Derek White plus the trade exception to go and bring in LeBron James on a $60 million deal. That's kind of where
correct.
I was leading. I was going to ask, what's the odds of, or who would you class as the most likely trade candidate among the younger guys? So I would assume Baylor Scheinman's name is going to be near the top of the list. But just in terms for production versus contractual value, who would you say, like, if you're a GM and I'm coming to you from the Celtics and I'm like, hey, you can take your pick out of our sub 24-year-old, 25-year-old guys, and we're going to give you a pick and whatever for your enter star player name here, which one would you expect to be the most sought after in trade talks?
I don't know if I'm the right guy to answer that because I don't pay enough attention to the Celtics to really be able to differentiate like Shireman, Gonzalez, all that much. But like I would guess maybe Gonzalez has a little more interest around the league. So maybe him. But overall, I wouldn't say like either of them are going to have that much value to be like the centerpiece in a math for them to get back.
Because this is where I feel the
Yeah.
Celtics are going to struggle. If we assume they keep Derek White and Jaylen Brown out of trade talks, they're going to have a really hard time, in my opinion, convincing teams to let go of guys without throwing in a little bit of like a deal, a sweetener onto a deal. And unless Brad Stevens is willing to trade a first round pick in 6 years' time, it's going to have to be one of these young guys. And that's kind of been the mentality that I've approached the summer with. Just don't get too attached to anybody because everybody not named Jason Tatum is most likely available.
And I would say the 27th pick is probably similarly valued. So yeah, the pick, Gonzalez, Shireman, nice sweeteners. Other than that, I can't really say. I mean, I'm sure they're going to keep Kada, but I don't think Walsh is really a sweetener at this point. So yeah, not too many guys. That depends obviously who you can replace them with in free agency, but I would definitely keep at least one of them because they're making so little. They're making under $3 million this year. Like that's going to be a lot of value towards staying under the tax, having just some productive players off the bench, and maybe one of these guys could emerge as a long-term starter. It's possible if they can, even if they aren't a starter, if one of them can be a guy who they can close with at times, that you have team control over those guys for 2 years. That will help them go a long way over these next few years for contending. So if they're not really helping too much get a trade done, I wouldn't just throw them in to give them away, so to speak.
the takeaway I've got is the Celtics are going to be active this season, but it's not until the following season where we see them, if they're going to swing for the fences on a move to add salary in a way that their tax bill isn't going to ultimately skyrocket. That's going to be a year away. So we're still in kind of part two of the retooling phase for Celtics fans. Is that how you'd kind of look at it?
Maybe 1.5, because part one, they're still trying to stay within a budget. But part two is you're going all in, and I think they're going to go somewhat in for setting the stage for the next few years.
Okay, perfect. I'm happy with that, though, as a Celtics fan. I want them to at least make moves where we feel like there's a step forward, because a first-round exit has sucked. But with that, Yossi, I want to say thank you. I know you woke up early to do this. I'm super grateful that you had the time. You made the time. Where I'm going to link to you everywhere, but just in case people decide not to scroll, where can they find your work?
You can all find me at Third Apron. That is my podcast. You can find it anywhere. My Substack. I'm putting off-season previews on each team over this month and the next month. So be on the lookout for that. I get really into advanced salary cap concepts to describe what each team can do this offseason. And I'm having guests as well to discuss their outlook, go over trades, moves that they can do within their salary cap restrictions. And then you can follow me on Twitter, Blue Sky. My name, Yossi Gozlan. Now it's the best time of year to follow me, where I'm going to have all sorts of instant salary cap analysis as soon as transactions happen.
Yossi's one of the best out there. We'll catch you later. Deuces.